Welcome everyone. Welcome into the video lecture series on Android application development. Today's topic of discussion is how to perform asynchronous tasks using SQLite. So let's dive into SQLite and how to work with the asynchronous task with it. So this particular session we are going to divide into two parts. First, we will try to understand what is asynchronous task. In the later on part, we will see how to implement SQLite database in our application. And in the third part, we will see how to bring asynchronous task with the SQLite together. Okay, so let's first try to understand what is asynchronous task. So, asynchronous task is something which is not sync with your main thread. So for that we need to understand the first thing, that is what is main thread or what is user interface thread. So when you begin with the application for the sake of Android, you are actually working with the user interface thread. That is the only main thread which is in the execution. So main activity.java, whatever you write down, that runs on that particular thread, that is the user interface thread. But let's say suppose you have certain task which you wanted to accomplish and which might take certain time. For example, you want to fetch the data from the server or the database which is remotely located. So in that particular case, your user interface thread will have to wait for certain time. It has to send a request to the server, and then by the time server will give the response, your user interface thread will remain on the freezing mode, isn't it? So for that particular purpose, we are going to use this asynchronous task. So in this particular case, we are going to ask, or we are going to put certain task onto the background thread. Okay, so your main thread or the user interface thread will request to the another thread, certain task will be accomplished on the background thread. By the time background thread is working, your user interface thread will still remain in the response. So that's the reason why we are going to use this asynchronous task. So this asynchronous task can be accomplished using a class, that is asynchronous task. Okay, you have to extend your existing class using asynchronous task, and there are certain methods which you have to override so that you can put or you can make that particular class as a asynchronous task class. Okay, so these are some methods which you have to override. The first one is on pre-execute. Okay, so on pre-execute is nothing but the method which will actually begin your thread. So this is actually executed on the user interface thread only, but before you will actually shift onto the background thread, whatever the stuff that you wanted to accomplish, that can be put in this on pre-execute thread or on this pre-execute method. Okay, once this is done, then there is another method, that is do in background. So whatever the task that you wanted to accomplish on the background, that will be kept in the do in background method. This do in background method will run on the background thread. So this is like a multi-threading. On the user interface thread, you might show some progress, whereas on the do in background, this particular method which is running on the background thread, you can actually execute certain background task, like executing certain task on the remote server, waiting for the remote server's response, something like that. In this do in background method, there is another method, that is on progress update. So let's say suppose you wanted to show some update, okay, that how much task you have accomplished, how much task is pending. So for that there is a on progress update. That method you can actually invoke. So this on progress update will actually put some progress bar onto the user interface thread, which will show that how much progress of that particular task has been accomplished. So this is like a more responsive way to handle with the more regressive task. Okay, and another thing, another method that we have over here is a on post execute. So once this do in background method has completes its task, then whatever the result is there, that can be shown using on post execute method. So this on post execute method, on pre-execute method, and on progress update, all these are actually running onto the user interface thread, whereas only one method, that is do in background, it runs on the background thread. So here is a more clear picture that how it works. So on pre-execute, which runs on the user interface thread. On progress update, it also runs on the user interface thread, and on post execute also it runs on the user interface thread. Whereas the do in background, it runs on the background thread. Okay, and here's the description. So I already told you on pre-execute, which will prepare the stuff which has to be accomplished using do in background. Okay, so what are the tasks that you wanted to do beforehand before you shift the progress onto the background thread, that can be done on the pre-execute. Okay, do in background is a mandatory thing. Okay, so when you are actually extending any class using asynchronous task class, do in background is essential, because do in background method is mandatory, wherein it will implement the task, or it will implement the mechanism that you wanted to accomplish on the background over here. Then on progress update, okay, this particular thing is actually invoked using publish progress. Okay, this publish progress is a method which you can write down within the do in background. So if you wanted to show some response to the user interface thread, then you can actually invoke this publish progress, and you can pass on some parameters through this particular method, which will be cached over here on this on progress update, and it will show how much progress you have done so far on that particular thread. Okay, so this particular on progress update, it will run on the user interface thread. On the other hand, also we have a on post execute. So this on post execute is nothing but a result which has been accomplished using do in background method. So once do in background method will complete this task, it will send some result. That result will be received over here on the post execute, and on post execute it will shown onto the user screen on the user interface thread. Okay, so here are the usage. To use the asynchronous task, you must subclass it. As I told you, you cannot directly start using the asynchronous task. You have to write down user defined class first, and that class needs to be extended using asynchronous task. And this particular class can be executed using execute method. So we will actually have the tutorial on this also in the later on part of this particular video. So from the main activity, you can actually call the execute method. This execute method will actually call the do in background method. So this do in background method will actually invoked using the execute call, and once this is done, then asynchronous task will be executed. Okay, so basically this asynchronous task is best suited for the network operations or the disk bound task, or suppose there is some more progress intensive task where you have to put on more resources and which will take certain time for giving the response. In that case also you can go with the asynchronous task. In the later on part, we will actually start with the second session or the second part of this particular tutorial, in which we will see the SQLite, and then we will see how to implement asynchronous task with the SQLite. Okay, so let's get started with understanding this application. This application I have divided into two parts. The first one is how to work with the database handler, means how to work with the SQLite database. That is the first part. And the second part, we will see how to use asynchronous task class with this particular SQLite. So let's consider this is a user interface. Okay, in this user interface I have taken some text views, okay, to display text onto the user screen. So name of student. The overall goal over here is to understand this concept. So that's why I have taken two edit text field. Over here we will get the name of the student entered over here, and another field will actually get the entry of the mobile number. Once you will have the entry of this, we are going to put that data into the SQLite database. Okay, so this is the edit text. This one is having the ID as a edit name, and this one is having an ID as a edit mobile number. And we have taken another button over here. This button will actually, on the click of this button, this data will be fetched from the user and will be entered into the database. So we'll see that. So here is the main activity. In the main activity, first I have created the objects, edit text, name and number, because I have used two edit text, so I will need two references, so name and number. And as I have used one button, so there is another reference for the button. Okay, these two objects I am creating, that is database handler and asynchronous task. I will explain you why I have created it over here later on part. Okay, so here I am getting the references of the edit name over here into the name. Edit mobile numbers reference is taken over here in the number, and this button save, okay, that button's reference I have taken into the button save, and everything has been typecasted over here. So if it is edit text, I am using the typecasting of edit text. If it is a button, I am using the typecasting as a button. And I hope you know that what is find view by ID. Okay, this find view by ID is another method which will actually get the ID. It will actually get the components ID, and through that ID it will return you the reference. So with the help of that reference, this object can be used for the further task. Okay, so this is a on click listener of this button save, and after clicking on this button I am going to call this save data method. So in this save data method, I am doing certain tasks which will facilitate to save the things which are being entered by the user into the SQLite database. So we will come back to this particular part again. Now we will see how to use or how to implement the SQLite. So in order to create SQLite database, you need to use this database handler. Okay, this database handler is a user defined class which has been extended by the SQLite open helper. Okay, so this SQLite open helper is actually a way to create a database. Okay, so whenever you wanted to create any SQLite database, you have to extend a user defined class using SQLite open helper. This SQLite open helper will allow you to create the SQLite database. Okay, this SQLite open helper class will have two methods. One is a onCreate and another one is onUpgrade. So this onCreate will allow you to create the database. Okay, so onCreate is actually a overridden method. You will actually get the DB as a SQLite database reference over here, and through that you can create a database over here. So this will allow you to create the table inside into the existing database. So we will go by the flow. So the first thing is that database helper, this is nothing but the constructor that we are using. This constructor is essential over here because once you are extending this SQLite open helper to user defined class, you have to supply the database name along with other parameters also. Okay, so over here I am using this context C. Now this context we are using as a communication between these classes. So I am using main activity class over here. Then this is a database handler class over here. In order to facilitate the communication between these two classes, I am using this context C. So when I am creating its object, that database handler's object in the main activity, I am actually passing its reference over here. See over here, database handler this. So that we can have the seamless communication between the main activity and then database handler. So that's why while we are creating the object of this, we are passing this over here. So this is nothing but the context of this particular main activity.java class. So that we are going to receive over here, and the same we are passing to the super. So super is nothing but the constructor of its super class. Okay, so SQLite open helper. This particular parameter will be passed over here, so that is nothing but the context. The second parameter that we are passing over here is the name of database. So here this particular thing will allow us to create a database. Okay, so this is nothing but a student database. I have passed the string over here. Okay, you can also create a string over here, and that also you can pass over here. Otherwise you can directly pass the name of the database over here. There's another parameter over here is a factory. Okay, this is a cursor factory to which we are keeping a parameter as a null. And the third parameter that we are passing over here is a version. So for example, you are dealing with the multiple databases. So in that particular case, you need to have the versioning. So version 1 of the database, version 2 of the database. Okay, but this particular thing should be non-zero. Okay, so the first version I am creating over here, that's why it is version 1. So this particular constructor will be invoked the moment I will create this particular object from the main activity. Once this is done, then onCreate method will be called, and onCreate method is nothing but an instance when this particular database will be created. So when the database will be created, what I wanted to do, I wanted to create table inside in it. So for that I have this reference DB, SQLite database DB. So it will be passed automatically to this particular method DB. So db.executeSQL, this method will allow me to fire queries for the database. So as this is the first time I am firing the query, I have to create the table. So that's why the query is create table, and here is the table name st_db student database, and these are the names of columns. So I need two columns because there are two parameters, or there are two fields from where I am getting the data. So first column is the name, its type is text, okay, because I am going to deal with the strings only. The second column is the mobile number, and again here I am using the text. So after execution of this query, what will happen, the table will be get created and the name of table will be st_db. There is another method over here which is getting overridden, that is onUpgrade. So that is onUpgrade is nothing but I am not using this method as of now, but if you want to use, every time there is a change in the instance, this onUpgrade method will be called. So for example, you wanted to check whether that existing table is there or not. You have created a table and the table is existing or not, that you wanted to check. In that particular case, you can use this onUpgrade. Or let's say suppose you want to truncate the table, or you wanted to do certain other activity, then you can use this onUpgrade method. So these two methods I am getting from the SQLite Open Helper. So this class is allowing me to create SQLite database. I hope you are understanding this. Then there is a third one. This is a user defined method that I have created. So in order to insert the data into the database, I have created this method, that is onInsert. This onInsert method is not been supplied by this class. It is not been supplied by SQLite Open Helper, but this is I have created. So this is a user defined method. So this method is actually getting two parameters. So one is a student's name and another one is a student number. So from the main activity, I am going to pass these two parameters over here. So onInsert, okay, as of now I have commented it. The reason because this is not the way that I wanted to do it over here. I wanted to do it using the asynchronous task, which we will see afterwards. But let's say suppose asynchronous task is not in the picture as of now. So in that particular case, I can just remove this comment and I can call this DBH. Okay, this DBH is nothing but the database handler object. So database handler is nothing but a user defined class which has been extended by the Open Helper, SQLite Open Helper class. Okay, so this is nothing but a DBH reference that I have taken, and then I have already created its object over here, DBH database handler this. Okay, so I have passed the reference of this current context to the constructor of the database handler. Okay, and now this DBH is ready for the use. Using this DBH, I am calling this onInsert method, which is written over here. This onInsert method, which is receiving two parameters over here, which are being passed over here. So the first parameter that I am passing is nothing but the name.getText.toString, because I wanted to convert that into the string. Name is referencing to the first edit text where the name will be entered by the user. So name.getText.toString, this is the first parameter. And the second parameter I am passing is the number, that is a mobile number. So it has been referenced to the number. So number.getText.toString. So it will be again converted into the string and that will be passed to the onInsert. So these parameters will be received in the smain and then snumber. So once we have these parameters available over here, then the next thing that we have to do is to create SQLite database object. So SQLite database object is different from the SQLite Open Helper. SQLite Open Helper will allow you to create the database, but whenever you wanted to work with the database, you have to create the object of SQLite database. So that we are creating over here, SQLite database SD. So SD is nothing but the object, and in this object we have to get the reference of the get writable database. So this is nothing but referencing to the current context. So current context is nothing but this database handler, and it will allow me to get the handle or get me the reference in order to work with that database. So for that I am using this method get writable database. So this will allow me to work with the tables directly. There are two ways, there are basically two methods, get writable and get readable database also. So when I wanted to read the database, I will use the get readable database, and when I wanted to write into the database, I will use the get writable database. So this get writable database will give me the reference into the SD, which will allow me to insert data into the database. So now I got the reference over here into the SD. So this SD is as of now ready to insert the data into the database. But how we will insert it? So for that purpose we need content values class. So you know that while we are inserting the data into the database, there are two things we have to deal with. The first one is the name of the column, and the second one is the data that we wanted to insert into that column. So for that we have the facility over here, that is the content values. So content values is nothing but the class. We are creating the object of it, that is a value, and new content value. So we are creating the object of it. This particular class will allow me, or this object will allow me to put the key and then its data pair. Okay, so over here I have this val. Val is nothing but the object of content values. So val dot put. So here the first thing that I am putting over here is the name of the column, and then second parameter that I am passing over here is the data that I wanted to store into that column. Okay, so here the val dot put, the name is nothing but a column name. So name is the first column name that I have, and what I wanted to store over here is the S name, which I received from the main activity.java. The second value that I wanted to put over here is in the mobile number. So mobile number is the name of column, and then S number is the data that I wanted to put. You can check over here, I have created these columns over here, name and then mobile number. So the same thing I am referring over here, name and then mobile number. So basically these are nothing but the columns which I have into that database, and these are the parameters, or these are nothing but the data values which I wanted to store into that respective columns. Once this is done, then I can use this SD object to insert the data. So sd.insert. Okay, so this SD object, using that SD object I am invoking the insert method. So this insert method is given by this SQLite database. Okay, so all the activities that I wanted to work, or I wanted to deal with the database, I will get readily available into the SQLite database class, and with the help of this object I can use this. So as of now I just wanted to insert the data into it, so that's why I am using this SD object over here, sd.insert. So this is the method given into the SQLite database class, and using the SD object I am referring it. So sd.insert. Now this particular method will take two parameters, or basically it will take three parameters. So one of the parameters that we are not going to use as of now, but you have to provide null value for that. It will take three parameters. The first parameter is nothing but a table name in which you wanted to insert. So the table name we have kept over here is the sd_db, sd_db. So while we are creating a table, we have given the name sd_db. So that's why I have taken this sd_db as a table name. Then the second is null column hack. So as of now we are not going to use it, that's why I'm keeping it as a null. And then third is the value. So these values are nothing but this is nothing but an object that I have created over here. So once I will pass on this value object over here, along with it, it will pass on the parameters, like two parameters, the name of column along with the data value. So it will pass in over here. So this particular thing will invoke, and it will insert the data into the database. Now how we will come to know that whether the data has been successfully inserted or not? So this method will return some value, and that value I am receiving into the result. So it will return the value into the long data type. So if the data has not been successfully inserted, it will return -1 over here into the result, and if the data has been successfully inserted, it will return the row value. So the current row value will be returned over here, so that we will come to know that how many rows are actually available into that table, and the current row value will be returned over here. So that value I am going to get over here in the result, and that I am going to return from this particular method. So let's consider this particular main activity has called it. Okay, this main activity on a single thread, as we wanted to work with only SQLite, so we called it using this result. Okay, this dbs.onInsert, so it will return that value into this result, and then using the toast method I can show on the screen that whether the result has been successfully inserted or not, or whether the data has been successfully inserted or not, that I will show over here. So this is all about you can work with the SQLite. Now in this particular thing, in this particular project, we wanted to work with the asynchronous task also. Okay, so for that I have taken this asynchronous.java class. Okay, so this is the asynchronous class. Now this is extended by asynchronous task. So this is the class I am extending. Okay, so asynchronous task class has been getting extended using asynchronous class. Now over here there is a 3 parameters you can see. These are basically a generic types. Okay, so the first thing is like string. So this is nothing but a parameters that you wanted to pass on to this particular class. The second one is a on progress update. So as of now we are not using it, so that's why it is void. And then second one is a result. So that is nothing but in the long form, so that's why it is long. Always remember, we cannot pass on primitive data types over here. So that's why you are seeing over here string, void and long. V is capital, L is capital. The reason is because all these are the non-primitive data types. Like all these are nothing but the names of class. You cannot directly pass on the primitive data type over here. So I cannot pass integer over here, I cannot pass float over here. But yeah, if I wanted to pass on integer, I can pass it as a class name, like an integer capital, INTGR, integer capital, I can pass it. But I cannot pass INT int over here, because INT int is a primitive data type, that I cannot pass it. And if at all you don't wanted to use it, you can put void over here. So for this asynchronous task, I wanted to pass on some parameters from the main activity, and these parameters will be in the form of string. That's why I have used string over here. The second parameter says that what kind of result update or what kind of progress update that we wanted to provide. So I don't wanted to show any progress updates, so that's why I have kept it void. And then second is a result. So result will be in the form of long. So asynchronous is a user defined class that has been extended using async task. So async task will have certain methods here that I have to override. So as we have already seen that in the presentation, there are 4 methods that we have to use over here that are need to be overridden. So first one is a on pre-execute. So if you wanted to do certain activity before this particular do in background will invoke, so I can write it down in the on pre-execute. Then there is a do in background method. This needs to be overridden. Then there is a on post execute method. So once the task has been completed, then you can use this on post execute to display the result over here. And on progress update is the another method that I don't need as of now. That's why I haven't taken it over here. So do in background. So before that we will see I have taken the context, then database handler as a reference of this database handler, because I wanted to use this asynchronous Java class in order to work with this database. So that's why I have used this database handler DB object over here, and then there is a result which is in the form of long. So before proceeding, I have used the constructor of this class async and have passed the context over here. The reason I am using the context over here is I wanted to have a seamless communication between the context that I am going to use. So in the main activity, I am creating this class asynchronous ASY, and this ASY new async this. So I am passing this context from over here. That context I am going to receive over here in this. So this is nothing but a way in which we can pass on the context from one class to another class, and we can have the seamless communication between the classes under the project. So that I have taken over here CT, and that CT is then copied into the context, which is nothing but the object, or which is nothing but a variable of this particular class of async. Okay, and then I am creating another object over here, or we can say the instantiating the object over here. DB is equals to new database handler, and again we are passing the CT over here, so that is nothing but a context. So let's assume that this main activity will call this asynchronous.java, and from that we are creating the object of database handler. So main activity is passing the context into the asynchronous.java, and this class is now then passing on that context into the database handler. So in the database handler, again I have this particular constructor where I am receiving this context. So consider the communication like this. Now this is the method which I wanted to invoke on the background. So that is nothing but the do in background. So do in background method will be invoked when I will call the execute method over here. So over here, see, asynchronous task object is there, and using this asynchronous task execute method I am calling. So the moment I will call this execute method, execute will call this do in background, and it will pass on some parameters over here. So what are the parameters that I am passing over here, like in do string, then this particular get string and all that, these parameters will be passed over here. Okay, in this string I have used these 3 dots over here to indicate these parameters are in the form of strings. Okay, that is a multi-tuple array. Okay, so this string is not a single string, but it's an array of string, and that I'm receiving in this parameter. Okay, so the first thing that I'm passing over here is nothing but a name. Okay, so this needs to be get commented. Okay, because this things needs to be accomplished using asynchronous task as of now. So that's why asy.execute, and these are the parameters. So name dot get text dot toString, it will pass over here the first string, it will pass the second string, which will be received over here in the param. So param of 0 will consist the first parameter which has been passed, so that is nothing but a name that I have taken over here. The second parameter which is in the array, so parameter of 1, which is in the form of a string, it is nothing but a number that I am passing over here. Once this is done, then I am calling this db.onInsert name number. So I have created this database object over here, db.onInsert name and number, which I have received over here from the main activity.java that I am passing over here, which will eventually come over here in the onInsert of this database handler. And rest of the things you know how to work with this insert method, how we have implemented it. So these things will be passed on over here, and what we are going to get as a result that after the insertion, that we will get over here in the result. So that is in the form of long. So that I have taken over here, and that result I am returning over here. So this particular result will be returned to this post execute, on post execute. So that result will be received over here, and then I can show that result over here. So this on post execute will execute after the execution of this do in background method. So once this execution is done, then only this particular method will be invoked. Now let's say suppose you wanted to show some progress, so you can use the update progress over here, and you can use that method on progress update, so to display the progress of your activity. But as of now I don't want it to display any progress, so that's why I'm not using this method over here. So this on pre-execute, on post execute over here, I'm displaying the result, that is the data inserted plus L. Plus L is nothing but the long value that I have received over here from this result. So this particular thing will actually indicate whether the data which I actually wanted to insert was inserted or not. If I failed in insertion, then it will show -1 in the L, and if I successfully inserted the value, then it will show the current row value over here, and this toast will be shown to the user. So this is how we will actually use this asynchronous. So from the main activity we will simply call this asynchronous.execute, and this asynchronous task will take place. So this will be done on the background, and once this is done, I can call simply finish method over here. So this finish method will stop the execution. So this is how we can actually work with the SQLite using asynchronous task method. I hope everybody is clear with the concept. If you want, I can just give you this particular project for the execution so that you can get the demonstration lively on your screen. Thank you.